Good evening. Welcome back to the third segment of the Glazov gang. Our gang members this evening, Eric Allen Bell, filmmaker and writer, Mark Tapson, Shillman Journalism Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and Nonie Darwish, modern-day freedom fighter and the author of the new book, The Devil We Don't Know, The Dark Side of Revolutions in the Middle East. Glazov gang members, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Very difficult in this half an hour to discuss all these issues that were coming up, especially in the first two segments. Let's quickly get back to the topics. We want to discuss in this segment Egypt self-destructs. I want to get to Egypt, but we have to catch up a little bit because so much to be said. There was a bit of a conflict and a collision in the earlier segments on building a mosque in America, what freedom's about, the First Amendment, freedom of religion, etc., etc. Eric, touch on that a little bit more for us, this dilemma that we face.
America is a social experiment unlike anything the world has ever seen before. So, in fact, we can speculate about what will happen if Murphysboro, Tennessee, a town of 100,000 people, has a 53,000 square foot mega mosque. We can definitely speculate about what could happen. But the fact is, none of it has happened yet, and we don't know. Arguably, if there is such a thing as moderate Islam, and I'm not sure there is, if there is, it will flower in the United States. The Muslims I met in Murphysboro, Tennessee, were moderate people. And my feeling is, as soon as we start to take away our own rights, we start to lower ourselves to that Saudi Arabian
What
level.
if an entire community is uncomfortable with a mosque being built? In America,
We have laws.
It doesn't matter.
We have
What did you
laws.
think of the mosque and that supremacist mosque being built on the grounds of 9/11?
I thought it was highly insensitive and totally legal.
Highly insensitive, but totally legal because
They have a
we're in
legal
America.
right to build
Sure.
it, and it's absolutely disgusting that they would do it.
Do one of you disagree with what Eric's saying?
No.
Well, according to our constitution, there should be no problem. Legally, there should be no problem. But that goes back because we define Islam as a religion. Imagine during the Cold War, when we are at the highest level of a problem with the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union government was sending money to people in America to build in every town in America a communist party building.
Then our whole society and culture, we simply have to start redefining Islam then.
Exactly.
That it is not a religion, but a political ideology, or that it's a cult. But how can we do that?
Because our definition of religion depends on anybody calling themselves a religion.
Yeah.
And we have to put a certain a legal definition for religion.
This is going to be very difficult to
accomplish.
There is a legal definition, and Islam fits it. My concern is, if we start to say, hey, Islam, because you're also a political system, you don't quite qualify, do we close the door on the possibility in America that there can be a reform movement in Islam? Because let's face it, Islam's not going to just disappear. I think the best we can hope for is reform. And the worst is a major world war with an Islamic
caliphate. It has to happen from
caliphate.
Saudi Arabia. The reform of Islam is not going to happen in America. America is the enemy. Whatever we reform here is going to be called Americanized Islam. They're infidels. We have a problem, and the problem has umbilical cords all the way to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to all of these. That's the problem of Islam. Okay. And this is what we're bringing in. Okay. We're bringing in an ideology, a destructive ideology of jihad that produces people who hate America.
Absolutely, Nonie. This is the problem. However, our society and culture and the world sees Islam as a religion. So somewhere we're going to have to change that to get to where you're talking about. But at the moment, what Eric's saying is we're a free society. We simply can't ban mosques in America. Correct?
How many people who call themselves Methodists really deeply believe that if they don't believe in Jesus Christ, they're going to be cast into a lake of hellfire for all eternity? My guess would be probably less than half. How many of the people in Murphysboro, Tennessee are hardcore Muslims? Most of the females I've met who are, let's say, under 30 are not covering themselves. I've seen numerous people drink.
But the problem is that they are actually considered bad Muslims in Islam. So we haven't. Mark, how do you see all this?
Well, I think the problem is, and what most of the protesters are actually protesting, is not their legal right to build such mosques, but the probability of fundamentalist ideologies coming out of these mosques. And I mean, I've seen reports that say that as high as 80% of the mosques in this country, and most of the what they call the mega mosques, are preaching this fundamentalist Saudi-funded version of Islam, which is quite radical and even violent. And that's what people are protesting. You know, they're not going to. For example, in New York, we'll just take the Ground Zero
and they're protecting
Mosque.
it as a religion when they're actually preaching the destruction of the United States and our Constitution.
Now, I'm not saying there's not a bigoted element among the protesters, but I think the protesters at large, for example, in New York, at the Ground Zero Mosque, they weren't protesting all 200 plus mosques in New York. They weren't there saying, you need to all get out. They were protesting the one mosque that was going to be built, you know, on pretty much sacred hallowed ground. They didn't go to all the other mosques saying, you don't deserve to be here. So, and the concern was about the Saudi funding and the Islamist connections among the developers of the Ground Zero Mosque. So I think that's what people are focusing on.
We have a major problem in the sense that what we're really talking about here is that there's a religion that's considered a religion, but in many respects it can be seen as a violent political ideology. How do you give freedom to Sharia proponents when they're actually, advocating the destruction of the United States and on the soil on which they exist? Quick counterpoint, Eric, and I want to get to the term Islamophobia, but you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, if we go down that road, if we close the door on the possibility that there can even be a moderate Islam at all in America, I think that's a scary road. I would rather have a 53,000 square foot mega mosque in the middle of Murphysboro, Tennessee, out in the open where we can see them, versus we don't know where they went. We don't know what they're teaching.
But we have to stress that moderate Muslims may exist, quote unquote, but there is in fact no such thing as a moderate Islam.
Well, Egypt was for many years considered a moderate Muslim country.
Yeah, but
when the ideology is not moderate.
But all Islamic schools.
See, you have moderate people. Yeah. But I'm not talking about people.
Yeah.
Now Egypt is sliding into almost a totally destructive situation.
We're going to get to that.
But the point I'm trying to say is when the ideology is not moderate, it forces itself on the system. When you're living in a system that's not moderate, even if you're moderate, you're shaped by the system.
Yeah.
So it's not really the choice of the people. Even moderate people are frustrated.
And Nonie, your books have stressed this. Robert Spencer has completely documented this. What I'm referring to is that there are no Islamic schools of jurisprudence that teach against Islamic supremacism. They all teach Islamic supremacism. Exactly. We only have about 3 minutes left. This term Islamophobia, what does it mean? It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It comes from the Muslim Brotherhood. Very briefly, Mark, what do you think about being an Islamophobe, which you are called, I think, sometimes?
Well, you brought up what I think is the key point, is that the Muslim Brotherhood, and a lot of people don't know this, they're not aware of it, the Muslim Brotherhood itself created that neologism. They created that word Islamophobia in imitation of other words that we've kind of adopted into our culture, like homophobia. They modeled it specifically after homophobia because they knew that Americans are sensitive to things like that, and that we will adopt that phrase and then start using it to shut down.
Mark, it's ridiculous. The things that you're concerned about, for instance, you don't walk down a street and see a Muslim woman with a veil and run across the street because you're scared. This is not what concern about Islam is about.
One thing a lot of people who call us Islamophobes forget is that Muslims themselves are possibly the most numerous victims of fundamentalist Islam.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we're actually standing up for the Muslim victims of fundamentalist Islam.
Nonie, quick thought on Islamophobia?
I have lived in both societies. I've lived half my life in the Middle East and half my life in America. In the Middle East, Islam victimizes everybody, and they victimize especially Christians and Jews, women. Everybody is a victim of Islam, and everybody has to live by the laws of Islam, even if you're a Christian. In America, to win in America, they have, they figured how to really influence themselves, influence America with their ideology by taking the position of victimhood. Mm-hmm. Because in America, the position of victimhood gives you power. And Islam in America is trying to put itself in the context of being a victim in America. But it's not a victim. Islam is a Islamic ideology, and the way the laws of Sharia are is they're victimizing everybody.
Absolutely. Eric, quick thought on Islamophobia, and I think you've become an Islamophobe, or the allegation has been made.
No, I have no irrational fear of Islam. You know, if I had an irrational fear of spiders, if one was in here, I'd freak out and scream and run outside of the room. If a Muslim was here, I wouldn't do that. Islamophobia implies an irrational fear. I don't have an irrational fear. I have a concern, and it's founded in reason and critical thinking and logic.
Thank you. We've come to the end. 20 seconds from each of you, please. We need to know what each Glazov gang member is up to in the next 4 to 6 months. Mark?
Wow. Well, I'm writing a lot for Front Page Magazine. I'm working on a book proposal, which I can't tell you about, and I'm working on screenplays.
And you're not being an Islamophobe.
And I'm currently not being an Islamophobe as we speak.
Nonie Darwish?
I'm speaking soon in 3 college campuses, which I'm very happy that I'll be doing. And my new book comes out, and I'm going to be very busy.
Do you get scared sometimes speaking on campuses? Is there violence or threats?
I have a lot of peace inside me, and I really come out every time I speak on a college campus. At least 1 to 2 students come and say, "You changed my thinking completely."
Eric, a lot of respect from all of us here for some of the courageous moves you've made lately. What are you up to in the next couple months?
I've been blogging a little bit about my change in perspective, and my real focus will be to secure financing to finish Not Welcome, the documentary, and tell the truth about Islam in America and the threat that I think it represents, and try to tell an honest story.
Eric Allen Bell, Mark Tapson, and Nonie Darwish, thank you for joining the Glazov gang. Join us next week for another edition. Good night.